Identify vSphere architecture and solutions. Okay, well, in that last nugget, I did promise you that this would be a relatively short nugget. I'm sure you're itching to get to the click by click. I would be. That's the fun part, really. But as I also said, before you can actually get there, before you can actually really understand what things you need to be clicking on and why, it's important to understand what the architecture is of vSphere and what the different solutions are as well. In this relatively short nugget, I want to just further cement the important differences between what ESXi is and what vCenter Server is. At the same time, I also want to just give you a quick introduction to what you may have been hearing about as it relates to private cloud, public cloud, and ultimately the interconnection of these two as a hybrid cloud. With that also, obviously vSphere is one of a large set of solutions, products and solutions in VMware's portfolio. And so I want to just kind of run through a few of the important items in that portfolio. They can be useful for you because certain items solve certain problems that are just not available or are very difficult to do right out of the box with VMware vSphere alone. I need to start, however, by just kind of going over what those products are. Now, VMware kind of breaks them apart into its data center products, its cloud products, the extensions to its data center products, and then the desktop and end user products. So different consumers of different products and also for different reasons. And the one set of products that we'll be using here are these up at the top. So vSphere 5, ESXi 5, vCenter Server, and then, well, obviously ESX. You will probably hear me use the term vSphere and vCenter, particularly when we're talking about the server, almost interchangeably. And that's my own, that's just me. My brain has a hard time keeping the two of them separate. So I will apologize in advance for using them interchangeably throughout this series. But what I want to tell you is that really the real definition of what these are is that vSphere is the entire sphere of influence that the data center products have. Right? So vSphere includes vCenter Server. It includes the vSphere client. It includes ESXi 5, and it includes some of these product extensions too. But vSphere itself is the larger scale umbrella for what all this stuff is. Now, vCenter Server is the management tool, whereas ESXi is the hypervisor and the functions that perform the virtualizing of your virtual machines. Right? You'll find out here a little bit that ESXi, very much different than ESX, is in a lot of ways almost like this appliance. They've stripped out so much out of this thing. It's very, very small now. And it being very small is a very powerful thing. It's a very smart decision on the part of VMware because as an almost appliance, you kind of light this thing up. And it's almost stateless. I mean, there's some configuration stuff in there. But you light this thing up, and then you do all the work in administering it, managing it, configuring it from vCenter. But the only thing you have to do on the host itself is putting in IP address information and setting the root password. And there's not that much to do. So why this is good is because as that almost quasi-appliance, the attack surface of an ESXi host is somewhat diminished. Right, in a regular Linux box, you got all kinds of daemons running. They're out doing print. There's a print daemon. There's a, I don't know, there might even be a graphical user interface daemon. There are different daemons for NFS. There are different daemons for whatever it is that are operating on top of that Linux instance. And whereas there is some Linux-ness to ESXi, again, there's a management partition on there that kind of does some Linux-like things. That exposure is extremely minimized. And in fact, there's a thing called lockdown mode that locks it down even further so that the vCenter server becomes more or less the only thing that can send instructions to each ESXi host. And if you're a person that is particularly concerned about security, well, that just makes your day very, very happy. So those are the data center products here. If you're used to seeing ESX, ESX no longer exists in version 5. We are all using this new ESXi version exclusively. I'll skip over the cloud products for a second because there are some product extensions here that make ESXi and vCenter do different things. vCenter Operations is a tool that brings the metrics, so all the performance stuff, think perfmon in the Windows world, all that performance stuff and the configuration stuff, all of that gets consolidated into a much easier to use, a very nice interface. I will tell you over and over and over again that the two most important activities in every virtualization environment are performance management and capacity management, and vCenter Operations makes those activities easier. Also is Site Recovery Manager. You already know probably that a fully built vSphere environment has this neat thing called HA, which is a cluster that if I lose a host, the virtual machines on that host will go somewhere else to continue performing their activities. Well, typically that somewhere else needs to be close in physical proximity to the dead host. All of the hosts have to connect to shared storage. Well, what Site Recovery Manager does is it extends the availability to a second site if necessary. So the hurricane creates the tornado, which causes the roof to collapse and flood your data center. All of that. If any of that happens and your data center goes away, well, Site Recovery Manager is the mechanism that will allow you to very rapidly fail over to a secondary site with all of the interdependencies correctly configured so that you can get back into operations very quickly. That's what it's for. Orchestrator what it does is it creates an almost framework with which you can add in additional automations. So Orchestrator allows you to say, I want this to do this because this has happened, and then roll in information from this to enact this change. And it's almost kind of developer-ish, but it's almost more like runbook-ish if you're familiar with runbook automation. Orchestrator is a mechanism that says, I want to essentially create actions based off of other behaviors. And Orchestrator is one of those tools that you will need it when you know that you need it. I guess at this point in your learning, you'll know you'll need it when you realize, oh my God, I need to be able to do this. And so Orchestrator will suddenly become important. Now at the desktop side, there are some other products as well, the first of which is VMware View. Very well known for its role in enabling desktop virtualization. And desktop virtualization, if you are completely unfamiliar, nothing more than let me virtualize Windows 7 or Windows XP and then deploy access over the network to my users. So my users are remotely accessing Windows XP or Windows 7, but it's back on my data center. So if you're a big fan of desktop virtualization, VMware View is a solution to do that. ThinApp is a tool that links with View or with really anything that will virtualize your applications. So you spin off a virtualized desktop and you want that virtual desktop to have Microsoft Office and your custom app and Oracle just in time, the Oracle client just in time installed onto that desktop. Well, ThinApp can do that. Neat software. Actually, very neat approach for delivering applications. Workstation we've talked about before. Workstation is the tool at your desktop that you use for simulating environments, for doing demos, for learning. ACE is been around for a long time, didn't get a lot of use early on, but ACE is essentially Workstation plus policies. So you can deploy out ACE and users can make use of different policy type things. So you can use this version of this VM, but you can't use it in a bridged networking scenario, whatever. So that's what ACE is. Fusion, Workstation for the Mac, and Player is Workstation for if you don't have any money and want to use it for free. Quite a few less features with Player. So Workstation, and in fact Player is actually bundled with Workstation these days. So if you get Workstation, you get Player as well. Player is a free tool. So these are the important items in the suite of products. I want to bring up one more view of this server architectures. We looked at this in the last nugget. This is the ESX servers and the vCenter server and the domain controller. This is this little micro environment that we're creating in order to run through the demos. And I bring this up again for a couple of different reasons. One is just to further crystallize the fact that ESX is right there. That's the hypervisor. That's where your virtual machines live. Right? Your virtual machines live here on this host. And they have local storage here. Each one does. There is also the shared iSCSI storage that we'll be using. And in your mind, I'll talk about this in a little bit of a later nugget, but in your mind, if you think of a computer, let's use an analogy of a person, right? So a computer is a person, and a person has both a brain and a body. And the brain is what processes the fact that, oh, look, the sky is blue today, or, oh, look, the dog has barked, or whatever. And the body is sort of there's more to it, right? And it's what enables the brain to function. Well, I like to use this analogy because when you're operating a virtual machine, there's sort of a brain to the virtual machine and then a body to the virtual machine, and they live in two different places. So the body of the virtual machines tend to live in this shared iSCSI storage location, right? That's where the disk file is, the virtual disk file. Any RDMs are typically installed there, which there's raw device mapping you'll find out about later. So this body is all of the stuff that makes up the virtual machine. But there's the processing that has to occur too, the brain. And that brain tends to operate up here utilizing the processors of the ESX host. The hypervisor facilitates that. It's the hypervisor that allows the brains to do whatever it needs to do. So when you think of, and we'll learn about this again more when we get into vMotion, when you think about vMotion and how cool and awesome vMotion is able to move VMs really fast because, well, it's moving the brains of the virtual machine from this host to this host, but the body stays in one place. It doesn't move. There is a technology called storage vMotion, which can move the body. But as you can imagine, if I've got an exchange virtual machine, well, moving the brains of the virtual machine, which is, its memory state, more or less, that's equal to about as many gigs of RAM as you assign to that virtual machine. Well, moving its body, I don't know, how big are the disks associated with your exchange server? Probably in the multi-hundred gigabyte range. So that visual, again, it's a metaphor, but that visual separation, mental separation between the brains and the body is very important in helping you understand where stuff lives and where it gets processed. Now split this whole image here, right here, because everything from here down is sort of the ESX and storage stuff. And then sitting on top of it, and I'm using a virtual machine, and you probably should too, is this management tool that is not a hypervisor. It's just a set of tools that tells the hypervisors what to do. That's what vCenter is. That's what the vCenter server does. It tells the ESX servers what to do. Hit the green VCR button and turn on that virtual machine. Hit the red VCR button and turn it off. Add an extra gig of RAM to that VM. Create a new one. Those sorts of actions are accomplished from the vCenter server. And all the authentication is accomplished, obviously, via Active Directory through its domain controller. That's what you need to know. That's just the important part there. But this is the architecture that we're going to be working with here. There's one final piece to this, and I'm going to just gloss over this fairly quickly because vCenter effectively creates what we think of as a private cloud. You have, if you've heard me, publicly speaking, if you've met me in person before, you've probably heard me talk about how private cloud, there's a lot of marketing and hype about private cloud, but at the end of the day, private cloud is in a lot of ways just vSphere with HA and DRS turned on. I mean, that's my argument. And some people will argue differently. Then there are other pieces to it, but a private cloud is just virtual resources you own. Right? I can provision resources to somebody because I have them in my available capacity. And so this cloud is this whole notion of, instead of it taking a month for a new server to get delivered, I can get it up in a few hours or a day because I have the resources and I can put them wherever I need to. And all the user knows that they have to do is generally point their laptop into this cloud somewhere and services are going to come out. That's all private cloud really is. And if you're getting confused about it, just remember that. It's vSphere with HA and DRS turned on. That's about all it is, plus a little bit more. Now, the public cloud is obviously out here on the internet. Many, many, many different manifestations of the public cloud. So there's software as a service. Software as a service is just a piece of software that you interact with via a browser. Right? Facebook is software as a service. Salesforce is software as a service. Amazon is, in many ways, software as a service. There's also infrastructure as a service. Right? And infrastructure as a service is, okay, I got some VMs that I'm running out of resources here, and I got to move some VMs off somewhere. Why don't I just burst into the public cloud? I'll just toss them up there, and somebody's got capacity that I just don't have. All right, well, I'll send them up there, and then they'll run for a while, and maybe I'll pull them back, or maybe I won't. I don't know. That's infrastructure as a service. There is a third type of cloud service, and that's platform as a service. Platform, if you are not a developer, is probably one of the least understood of the as-a-service services. And platform as a service is you could code your custom app using Visual Studio and IIS, but what if we just create this nice platform with which you could put your custom app into? Microsoft Azure is a good example of platform as a service. Right? You don't just install a virtual machine into Microsoft Azure. You actually code an application that Azure then, you code it for Azure, and then Azure then adds in nice, very easy, I can expand this thing, I can burst it, I can do different things, I can move it to different data centers because all the facilities are available in a coding sense there. So those are your three kind of public cloud things. The hybrid cloud is simply the connection between the two. So if I have some VMs here and I'm running out of resources, and I know it's going to take me a month to get more hardware in, well, I could potentially burst myself out into the public cloud, Amazon or hosting.com or Rackspace or any of those infrastructure as a service providers. There's VM in the cloud providers that are available. I just go send those VMs out there, and then I create a connection between the two using some sort of very secure VPN tunnel. This is very basic stuff. Some very secure VPN tunnel so that those VMs out there talk to my VMs inside. Or perhaps they talk also to the rest of the world. I don't know. It's up to you. And nobody anywhere is trying to tell you to move all your stuff into public cloud. What we're just saying is that sometimes services make sense here in the private, and sometimes they make sense up in the public, and you can connect the two these days with nice VPN tunnels that are secure, and just do whatever's smart. And that's the whole notion of private, public, and hybrid cloud, is you just got options now. And vSphere provides some of those options, and then VMware's vCloud solutions can provide additional options there. You can link into public cloud instances in certain circumstances as well. But just making the two of these operate is almost a seamless whole that's very secure and just works based off of your needs, your available resources, and then where you think you should put stuff is kind of where we're going today as it relates to private, public, and hybrid cloud. So everything that you are thinking about today as it relates to vCenter and vSphere is kind of just the first step. You got to learn how to virtualize, and then you got to come to embrace how do I do it here or do I do it there, or do I put some here and some there? Where does it make sense? So hopefully this nugget has given you a little bit of information about the vSphere architecture, both where we're at and where we're going. Also the solutions that are available from VMware in the space. And most importantly, where do all these products sort of fit? In that next nugget, we're going to start through the click-by-click. We're going to start with installing our vCenter server and getting into ESX and all the fun things that involve clicking in the interface. Until such time, however, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.